The following was originally broadcast on Northumberland 89.7 FM. For more podcasts and learn more about us, go to northumberland897.ca. And thank you for downloading this podcast.
This is The Morning Show, and you're with David Newland. I've been featuring over the last few weeks the Art Gallery of Northumberland Spotlight Series artists, and this morning's artist joins me on the line. Good morning to you, Oli Goldsmith.
Oh, hi there, David.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. You are a fine artist as well as a commercial artist. You work in both digital and traditional media, let's say, in unique combinations. You've made your home in Port Hope for about a decade now, and I've set folks up by playing a couple of Our Lady Peace songs, because among some of the other extraordinary collaborations and big ticket work you've done, you did quite a bit of work with them, including work on videos and album covers and that sort of thing. Since we're a radio station, do you want to start by talking about that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I met the band I guess I was 20 then, and it was this album, Spiritual Machines, that came out in around 2000. I ended up doing the Sony music art director saw my artwork on display at a show in Toronto, and I got a call later that summer from them and went to meet up, and everything went well. They they wanted to have a different, more art-focused kind of approach without having like band photography and that kind of thing. So it worked content-wise. It's interesting. Is this book Spiritual Machines by this guy Ray Kurzweil about sort of the future of technology and virtual reality and all sorts of these kind of topics that I was kind of interested in anyways. But it turned into doing a fold-out album art. These things have kind of gone away now that it's streaming.
Yeah, it seems old school in a way to talk about album art, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I guess with vinyl having a bit of a resurgence. Basically right now, in about a month, I've just recently finished a follow-up cover for, they're doing Spiritual Machines 2, which comes out in I think a month or something. But I did a follow-up cover for that. So that'll be out on vinyl as well as streaming and those kind of services. But and also a couple of animated NFT things, just to be current or whatever. I've done a few variations of the album cover artwork. Back with the first one, probably the bigger thing was the music video for a track In Repair.
Yes, which I played earlier on the show.
Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah. That back when Much Music was a big deal. It won all the main awards that year, and it was a pretty hectic, crazy thing to take on. I only had 2 or 3 weeks to do it, and it was sort of learning this Adobe After Effects animation tool, sort of throwing you in the fire and go
no kidding.
And do it. But it's a good way to learn, and it turned out pretty cool. It's still one of the things I'm better known for.
Yeah, it's not only a great resume piece, but in a way it's a great place to dive into your work, because it seems to me that you live comfortably in the intersection between commercial work, popular art, and fine art. Do you want to talk about that as regards your own process?
Okay, commercial work. I have done a lot of, after the Our Lady Peace stuff, I'd already done a lot of website design was kind of a thing at the late 90s. I grew up using Macs, doing kind of my own publication, little magazines and that kind of thing. And so I had learned the tools for desktop publishing and Photoshop and that kind of stuff while I went to school for art. And really, already in my teens, was combining in my fine art various techniques using the computer alongside sort of abstract, expressive painting, mark making, and also with just a love of the physical aspect that often is missing, working on a computer and it's completely flat, kind of, whether it's on a display or printed out only. I use printing techniques and all sorts of digital processes now still, but I combine them with like pastel and layer them in resin and do various things that bring back that handmade, hand felt depth aspect to the physical media.
Do you know where that comes from? That desire to, to be organic and physical in the digital realm, so to speak.
I think, yeah. Well, maybe I feel like it's what's lacking from one set of tools. There's sort of a instinct in me that, I really like the work of David Carson did a Ray Gun magazine and stuff back then, doing very sort of arty, abstract kind of layouts, but with crisp digital stuff.
Right.
And just kind of combining them as almost like this completely chaotic collage-y kind of thing, but on the printed page. And so, among other things, that inspired me a lot.
How do you see your process now, as digital has become more and more the go-to for people? And, I can imagine that in the late 90s, a guy who's fully embracing digital tools, it seems avant-garde, you're kind of ahead of the curve. Now I wonder if the physical part of your process is the avant-garde part.
No, it's interesting. I've always sort of talked about like having one foot in traditional and one foot in digital, and having almost the digital being a wider scope than just computers.
Of course,
also including most recently these like 360 video cameras that I've been using, and just digital photography. But as an example of something where this, basically I referred to technology as sort of my muse in a way, where it's always, there's something, some new possibilities emerging all the time. Not trying to totally be a master of all of them, but to keep sort of one foot in that.
Right.
Keeps the work evolving. Keeps sort of I've referred to it as like a B-side sort of thread to my art making process. Specifically the photography thing in the last couple of years, and this is something with Port Hope as well, living here. I sort of started messing around with sort of these, they're for virtual reality, for 360 photography, panoramas and that kind of thing. And I have some cameras for that that I've been taking pictures around town, and also in my studio, sort of mixing photography of the art making process back into the art as well. That's
interesting. That's a kind of a postmodern gesture in a way.
It is a little bit. It's funny. I have some new pieces that my pieces very much are sort of encapsulated worlds in a canvas, and this increasingly sort of, there's this very density to the imagery, but there's sort of different levels you can look at it from a sort of a standing maybe 5-10 feet back from the canvas. It'll look like a tapestry or something, sort of like a very patterned kind of scene. I almost think of it as not white noise, but when you get back from something quite busy, like a Jackson Pollock piece or something, it's like all the chaos of it becomes like a kind of plain field, and then but if you come in closer to the works I've been doing, and you'll even look at them from a couple inches away, and there'll be sort of little microscopic collages of scenes and paintings sort of happening right
It strikes me as a very web-like form of art in a way. You know, if you work a lot in digital
that's interesting,
spaces,
actually.
right? Like that's kind of how they work. You know, you can have the broad scope of, let's say, a Google search results page, and you're just glancing over it, but you can do your deep dives, and you're like every link in a Wikipedia article is a new place to go, right?
No, that's a great mirroring of kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah,
it's a fractal, if you will, right?
Yeah, no, fractal definitely is how I would think of it, as the sort of micro macro fractal holographic kind of thing. And so still there's like a mixture of really kind of raw hand drawn characters and scenes. I mean I do like to just draw every day. I kind of, my most prized possession thing in terms of my art is probably these like 50 to 100 notebooks that I have.
Wow.
Filled with mostly simple drawings and that kind of thing. But and then I take those and will work them into all sorts of other modified things in the computer, patterns, like textile pattern type stuff, scenes that, like three-dimensional scenes, environments. I eventually do want to explore, like I have this early headset for VR stuff that at some point, maybe not for 5-10 years or something, but the technology is getting there. I've always sort of, I mean, it maybe goes back to when I was doing CD-ROM stuff when I was younger, and there was this whole era of CD-ROM things that have been totally like forgotten now. But,
yeah, I used to be a writer for CD-ROM, so I remember it well.
Yeah, okay, cool. Like I did when I was younger these prototypes for like interactive, not video games specifically, but kind of like an environment that you'd explore and interact with. And I mean, when I applied to my quote-unquote painting, I see sort of exploding the stuff in them out into a three-dimensional space where you can, as a participant, viewer, whatever, walk around and maybe talk to or hear some of the characters.
Interesting. Yeah.
I have a kind of vague idea in my head of where I want to take that, and I've been toying with it a little bit with some early NFT things that I've been doing. But
so much of what you talk about has to do with, if you will, fictional or imaginary spaces, but they have a geography to them. And you've also mentioned your work around Port Hope, and you know, being here has to have affected your process in some way. And I'm wondering to what extent your sense of place, let's say as a citizen here in Northumberland County, and your sense of place as a creator of digital geographies intersect.
It's an interesting question. I mean, yeah, I lived in Toronto for the first chunk of my life, and that was fine, but I moved here mostly to have more space. And although I thought, and well, at the time I did sort of thrive off the energy of a bigger city, of having just so much happening all the time, this kind of energy around everywhere. There's been a shift. I mean, the shift here, coming here, and having, it might be a kind of cliche kind of answer, but just having this environment and space to be with my work and maybe be a bit more exploratory of like my inner worlds and that kind of thing, where the city, I wouldn't even have realized the extent to which that was maybe cutting me off from that kind of thing. In terms of geographies, I'm not so sure that if there's any kind of mapping that I can apply to my work that fits in terms of like a physical geographic kind of.
Right. It doesn't look like a walk around Port Hope, for example.
No, well, yeah. Some of them actually. I mean, some of these I call virtual surreality, or there's these what I flipped what I call it, hope portals. They're kind of these 360 wormhole. They're taking like a lot of the 360 footage and or stills, using them kind of how they're meant to be. I often use technology in sort of, it's kind of a way that musicians often, like rock groups, will talk about using instruments, not in ways they are not supposed to be used.
Yep.
Kind of, I think of it like that. Is I'll play around with something like camera stitching, where it stitches a bunch of pictures together into a panorama, but I'll purposely put a kind of off-kilter group of pictures together, and it'll stitch it all kind of weird. And then I'll take lots of those and use tools to bend them and warp them, and then kind of stitch together a whole super panoramic image that also has that kind of macro micro level of stuff going on. It's very interesting. There'll be broad, sort of like at the park over here where I walk my dog. She'll be on a leash, and the baseball diamond or something will expand over here, and then over in the side there'll be a little view from inside my studio, and then maybe my computer screen working on a piece will be somewhere else, and then just a pile of art supplies. But you don't notice it in the overall. It feels like a very abstract piece in many of these cases, but in some, definitely you can tell Port Hope is. If you know Port Hope, you'll recognize elements.
Yeah, it's true in the Hope portals in particular.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking it's interesting because it's not necessarily because it's Port Hope that it takes the shape that it does, right? And so
no, that's true.
There's a play between this kind of imaginative space that you're creating or maybe expressing. I wonder, there's a lot in your work that it has the appearance of maybe frenzy or multiplicity, multifacetedness, and
chaos. I don't think of it as chaos really, but
I wondered. Yeah,
I'm sure many people would go away from it.
I think for some people certainly it would be a new way of looking at things that they might initially see in an anxious way, but I don't actually sense anxiety in the work or in your understanding of it.
It's not generally about any kind of like anxiety or a kind of panicky thing happening. It's more, I have been drawn to that density of imagery, perhaps, and earlier on, I think more consciously as a mirroring of kind of a pop art aesthetic, but not so much based on pop art, but capturing a sense of this sort of hyper media saturated environment.
Right.
I was into studying a lot of that kind of stuff in school, in terms of media theory and media literacy and all that kind of stuff. So I've been attuned to that topic and sort of looking at, and it's only grown all the more sort of bombarding of imagery in terms of the internet, this kind of thing.
Right.
But in terms of my work, I find that I've turned to it being very much a personal vocabulary over time, not really sampling stuff from the media to put into my pieces like I once would have. And it's become more of sort of like a mental snapshot of sort of, an imaginary kind of space, if you will, that's very personal in a surreal kind of way to who Oli is, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's very well said. Personal in a surreal kind of way. There's two quotes from Picasso that happened to cross my mind while you've been talking. I mean, the first is that something to do with greatness is when you begin to borrow from yourself or to quote from yourself.
That's a good one. I forgot that one.
I love that you mentioned you're kind of at that stage now. And then the other one that I really see in your work is Picasso said something about, that the artist responds to their muse their times into art itself, right? And I really see that in your work. Clearly you have a particular muse that's very much your own, but you're also responding to the times absolutely in your techniques and your subject matter and your methodology. But there's also a dialogue with art itself, right? In how representation works.
Sure, of course. Yeah, I know. There's a couple of things there. I remember. Yeah, I think it was a quote from that Sony Music art director about my stuff, but calling it sort of Zeitgeist 101 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was my work. Was a little bit simpler in a lot of ways back then, but still had that kind of flavor to it. And then I think there's sort of everything from a nod to I don't know, early cave painting or like hieroglyphics or sign making throughout my stuff, and there's kind of an archaic techno kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that. Well, look, it's a deep dive, and I encourage everybody to take that deep dive with you if they don't know your work or if they haven't seen it in a while. OliGoldsmith.com is a great source for lots of that imagery, and they can learn all about your collaborations with artists and clients, and just see some excellent examples of your amazing work. Any final thoughts just on being an AGN Spotlight Series artist, Oli?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity to both meet other artists and get a feel for more what's happening in the community, and to be a part of hopefully encouraging younger artists in Northumberland to follow their passion and kind of put roots down here and maybe try to create more of a scene here. So
that's really cool, and you're not the first to refer to the need to form scenes here, and that's on all of us, the older artists as well as the up and comers. So. Thanks so much for inspiring. I know anybody who's listening will be wanting to appreciate more of your work, and hopefully, yes, some of those young artists out there will get the idea to pick up whatever tools and combine them in whatever ways to express the visions they have. Oli Goldsmith, thanks for your time, and congratulations on being an Art Gallery of Northumberland Spotlight artist.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Talk to you later.
Bye now.